The tension in Washington, D.C. was thick enough to slice with a knife. It was a crisp Monday morning, and the media buzzed with anticipation. A special congressional hearing had been called, one that promised fireworks. Whispers in the corridors of the Capitol spoke of potential political bloodshed, with two titans on the docket: Jim Jordan, the sharp-tongued Republican from Ohio, and Nancy Pelosi, the seasoned Democrat from California, a former Speaker of the House. The hearing was announced just 48 hours earlier and already had all the makings of a historic confrontation. Officially, it was titled The Integrity of Government Institutions: Oversight, Accountability, and Transparency. But everyone knew it was code for the fight of the decade. What sparked the drama? A leaked set of emails allegedly tied to high-level pandemic-era spending. Funds meant for small businesses and healthcare relief were supposedly rerouted, some believed, through questionable non-profit organizations with close links to former House leadership. Pelosi's name was floating around the scandal like a ghost that refused to vanish. Jim Jordan had seen enough. Backed by a coalition of hard-nosed oversight hawks, Jordan pushed for the hearing with laser focus. For him, this wasn't just about government waste, it was about taking a stand against political elitism. As cameras rolled and media vans crowded the Capitol's West Lawn, the hearing room was packed. Every seat was filled. C-SPAN, Fox News, MSNBC, and YouTube live streams were already drawing millions of viewers. Hashtags like hashtag Jordan vs. Pelosi and hashtag Capitol Clash trended within minutes. Jordan, dressed in his signature shirt and tie without a jacket, sat at the head of the committee like a lion waiting to pounce. Pelosi entered the room flanked by her aides and congressional allies. Dressed in a powder blue suit, she smiled and waved to the press. A practiced, graceful politician to the core. But Jim Jordan wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. The hearing opened with the gavel bang that echoed like a thunderclap. Jordan leaned into the microphone. Let me be clear. Today we're not interested in spin. We're here for answers. The American people demand accountability, and that's exactly what we intend to deliver. Pelosi raised her eyebrows, leaned back in her chair, and sipped water. The smirk on her face said it all. You can't touch me. Jordan continued, citing discrepancies in fund allocations. We have emails, Madam Speaker. Emails linking your office to directives sent to the SBA and HHS. Over $400 million moved without standard procedure. Care to explain? Pelosi chuckled. Congressman Jordan, your talent for dramatic fiction never ceases to amaze me. Let's not confuse emails with actual evidence. But Jordan wasn't flustered. He'd come prepared. He held up a thick file. This, Madam Speaker, is just the beginning. Attached are cross-verified bank statements and communications from your former chief of staff that suggest otherwise. Gasps echoed across the room. Even Pelosi's inner circle looked uneasy. Still, the California congresswoman refused to back down. If you think bullying and baseless accusations will intimidate me, Congressman, think again. I've been through far worse battles than this. Jordan didn't blink. Then you won't mind us asking the hard questions. Under oath. The hearing room fell into a thick silence as Jim Jordan's words hung in the air like a guillotine ready to drop. Then you won't mind us asking the hard questions. Under oath. Nancy Pelosi, unfazed on the surface, turned to her counsel for a brief moment. The cameras zoomed in. Was it hesitation? Was it strategy? No one could tell. I have nothing to hide, Pelosi said finally, her voice steady. Swear me in. The room erupted. The chair banged the gavel again to regain control. A House clerk approached with a Bible, and Pelosi, lifting her right hand, swore the oath with a slight smirk. To her, this wasn't her first rodeo, it was just another chapter in a long career of political battles. But today felt different. The old playbook might not work here. Not against Jim Jordan. Jordan wasted no time. He leaned in, eyes locked on his target. Congresswoman Pelosi, he said slowly, do you recall an email exchange dated March 18, 2021, between your Chief of Staff, Marcia Ellsworth, and Deputy Director Harold Kessler of the SBA? Pelosi frowned. I'd have to review that. I get hundreds of emails every day. Jordan lifted the file. Let me read it for you. Harold, ensure the transfer is processed through PP Foundation. The Speaker's office will handle the announcement post-approval. That email, Ms. Pelosi, came directly from your office. Pelosi interjected, first of all, that doesn't prove wrongdoing. The PP Foundation was a legitimate partner during the crisis. They helped thousands. Jordan raised an eyebrow. That same foundation received $12.8 million in expedited relief funds 4 days before approval. Want to know what else we found? Your nephew sits on their board. Coincidence? Pelosi leaned back. Nancy Pelosi leaned back in her chair, momentarily breaking eye contact with Jordan. She took a slow breath, calculating. The room sensed it, the pressure was mounting. Congressman, she replied carefully, I was not directly involved in the operations of the PEP Foundation. My nephew's affiliation has no bearing on the approval process of federal relief funds. If there was any impropriety, it would be administrative, not personal. Jordan wasn't letting up. You expect the American people to believe that $12.8 million was funneled to an organization connected to your family by accident? That you, Speaker of the House at the time, had no knowledge of this transfer happening ahead of schedule, bypassing protocols. He turned toward the projection screen beside him. Let's show the room what we found, shall we? A PDF of internal SBA memos appeared on the screen. Highlighted in red were phrases like, prioritize PP per leadership, and Speaker's office request. Gasps rippled again through the gallery. Pelosi's composure showed signs of wear. She shuffled in her seat and whispered something to her aide. Jim Jordan knew he had her off balance, and that's when he struck harder. This isn't just one organization, he continued. Our audit found five different nonprofits that received pre-authorized, expedited relief from your office, all with board members or donors with direct ties to your family or political campaigns. Pelosi raised her hand, her voice rising slightly. Let me be absolutely clear, during a national crisis, we were working with hundreds of local groups to distribute aid quickly. Any overlap in associations is coincidental. I won't sit here and have my name dragged through the mud for trying to help this country survive COVID. Jordan smirked. Helping America survive? Or helping your network thrive? The Democrats on the panel stirred uncomfortably. Whispers began. Journalists scrambled to tweet. Fox News ran a lower third banner that read, Breaking, Jim Jordan links Pelosi office to pandemic fund misuse. But Jordan wasn't finished. He slammed a folder onto the desk in front of him. Let's talk about Emergent Cares, a company that received $48 million for producing PPE. That company was dissolved 8 months later. Guess who their legal counsel was? He paused. Ellison and Bloom, a firm where your daughter is listed as a senior advisor. This time, Pelosi didn't answer immediately. Her jaw clenched. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk. A drop of sweat traced down her temple, and though she tried to hide it, the nation watching from their couches and phones could feel the crack in her armor. Jim Jordan leaned forward again, voice now slow and cutting. Is this your legacy, Congresswoman? While Americans were dying and small businesses were going bankrupt, your office was allegedly directing taxpayer funds into a web of personal and political connections. All of it hidden under the cloak of crisis. Pelosi's voice, suddenly lower, came through the mic. I will not dignify political theater with further response. I've served this country for decades, and I won't be lectured by a man who's never carried the burden of leadership at my level. Jordan replied, Maybe not, but I've also never misused the public's trust for personal gain. The room fell silent. Then came a voice from behind the dais. We're going to take a 15-minute recess. But it wasn't just a break. It was the moment America realized this hearing had real stakes. When the hearing resumed, the mood had shifted dramatically. Pelosi's staff had circled her like hawks during the break, whispering legal strategy, crisis comms, and exit plans. But no amount of spin could fix what was already unraveling live on national television. The moment she returned to her seat, Pelosi seemed altered. Still proud, but slightly deflated, like a boxer re-entering the ring knowing she'd already lost on points. Jim Jordan, meanwhile, was sharper than ever. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for rejoining us, he said with a cool confidence that bordered on surgical. I'd like to enter into evidence the recorded testimony from Harold Kessler, Deputy Director of the SBA, taken just 2 nights ago under subpoena. He nodded to the technician. A video clip began playing on the overhead screen. Kessler, in a video deposition, spoke clearly. We were instructed directly by congressional aides to prioritize nonprofit recipients associated with Speaker Pelosi's office. We were told delays were not acceptable. At one point, I questioned the legality. I was told, quote, "This comes from the top." Pelosi shifted in her seat. "This is taken out of context," she blurted almost involuntarily. But Jordan wasn't stopping. Mr. Kessler also testified that he was threatened with reassignment if he pushed back. That means taxpayer money was weaponized under pressure. So again, I ask, how deep does this go, Madam Speaker? Pelosi turned to the chair. I request counsel be allowed to speak on my behalf regarding these unfounded allegations. The committee chair looked stunned. Are you refusing to answer questions directly? I'm invoking my right to consult legal counsel, she said. Jordan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. That's not the tone you started with, Congresswoman, he said quietly into the mic. Suddenly, it's not so funny. Then the unexpected happened. Representative Claudia Melton, a freshman Democrat from Colorado and a former Pelosi ally, cleared her throat and spoke. Mr. Chairman, if I may, she said nervously. I believe it's time we seriously consider an independent ethics investigation. The allegations presented today are damning. Our credibility as a body is on the line. That moment was electric. Pelosi turned toward Melton, stunned. You're siding with them? She asked, voice brittle. Melton looked down. I'm siding with the truth. Gasps swept through the chamber like a tidal wave. It was the first public crack in Pelosi's own caucus. Jim Jordan seized the moment. You see, America, this isn't just about party lines anymore. This is about right and wrong. It's about trust. While working-class Americans were begging for aid, this chamber was allegedly playing a dirty shell game with relief money. He paused, the room frozen in anticipation. And the American people deserve better. News stations ran with it immediately. Pelosi loses support on live TV, Jordan's hearing rocks Capitol, fall from grace. The political earthquake had reached every living room in the country. Meanwhile, outside the Capitol, a crowd had gathered. Protesters, supporters, reporters. Helicopters buzzed above. It felt less like a hearing and more like a reckoning. Inside, Pelosi gathered her notes with trembling hands. Her legendary poise had given way to visible distress. She leaned into the mic one final time. I'll be releasing a full statement later today, she said stiffly. And I categorically deny any wrongdoing. This is a circus, not a courtroom. Jordan's reply came fast. Then let the real courtroom sort it out. Because that's where this is heading. The hearing room was no longer just a stage for testimony, it had become a battlefield where legacies were on the line. The final hour was set in motion not by Jim Jordan nor by Nancy Pelosi but by the unexpected return of a witness whose name had barely surfaced in months. As murmurs circulated, the chair announced. Committee will now hear from surprise witness. Anthony Delgado, former budget analyst for the Office of Congressional Grants and Allocations. The name caused Pelosi to flinch. Delgado had vanished from public view after abruptly resigning in 2022 amid rumors of internal conflicts with House leadership. Now, clean-shaven and wearing a sharp gray suit, he stepped forward and raised his hand to be sworn in. Jordan leaned into the mic, eyes gleaming. Mr. Delgado, you worked directly under the Speaker's fiscal review team during 2020 and 2021, correct? I did. Were you aware of the PP Foundation funding before it was public? I was the one who flagged it as unusual. The room hushed. Jordan continued, did you raise those concerns with Speaker Pelosi's office? I did. In an email followed by an in-person meeting with her chief of staff. I told them a pre-approval fund release with no competitive application violated standard allocation procedures. And what was the response? Delgado shifted slightly. I was told, and I quote, we don't have time for red tape. This is an emergency. The Speaker is watching this closely. Jordan nodded. Was that when you decided to resign? No. I decided to resign after I saw internal memos showing future contracts pre-drafted for organizations months before they were supposed to apply. He held up a flash drive. Those files are all here. I've turned them over to the Oversight Committee and the DOJ. Pelosi exploded. This is a coordinated smear campaign. This man resigned in disgrace. He has no credibility. Jordan's gavel slammed down. Let the evidence speak, Madam Speaker. That flash drive isn't gossip. It's documentation, emails, memos, internal communiques, hundreds of them. All pointing to a pattern of pre-planned enrichment of political allies using federal funds meant for emergency relief. Delgado's voice cut through again. And I'm ready to testify under oath in federal court. For the first time, Pelosi's eyes darted not in defiance but in fear. She had always been a master of message control, able to spin any situation, any controversy, into something survivable. But this was raw, documented, witnessed, and uncontrollable. The chair called for silence and then spoke. We will now vote on a formal recommendation for an ethics probe and request that the Department of Justice open a preliminary investigation into the findings of this committee. Pelosi stood, voice trembling but sharp. I will not be railroaded. This hearing is political theater at its most dangerous. I've served this country for decades and I will not be silenced by a political hit job. Jordan looked at her. Not angry. Not smug. Just firm. We're not silencing you. We're just holding you to the same standard every American deserves from their leaders. Cameras captured the stare down. History would remember this image, the moment when power met accountability head-on. Later that evening, the story dominated headlines. Pelosi facing ethics probe after explosive testimony. Jim Jordan unleashes political earthquake on Capitol Hill. Flash drive bombshell, DOJ opens inquiry into relief fund misuse. Cable news spun it both ways, of course, but one thing was clear across the board: the tide had turned. Outside, protesters on both sides clashed in chants. Some called it justice. Others screamed about partisanship. But beneath it all, Americans everywhere were tuning in and asking questions. Nancy Pelosi released a late-night video calling the hearing a dark day for democracy. But the comments were filled with outrage, disbelief, and demands for accountability. Meanwhile, Jim Jordan walked out of the Capitol to thunderous applause from supporters. To them, he hadn't just won a political skirmish, he had stood up for transparency. For justice. For America. And though the legal process would take months, perhaps years, what began in that hearing room had already left its mark on history. A once untouchable titan had been challenged. And perhaps dethroned.